This is eastern Iowa on the bank of the Mississippi River. The place Muscatine. Back in the late 1820s to 1830s, we find the foundation of this river hamlet by a certain Colonel Davenport as a trading post and the place for redirecting lumber, which was transported downriver. The east-west bend of the Mississippi at this junction caused log jams, sparking the place's original appellation, Casey's Woodpile. The era which frames and forms the context of our history of this place finds Samuel Langhorne Clemens, a.k.a. Mark Twain, working as a typesetter at the local newspaper. This was the age of writing of such American authors as Edgar Allan Poe. In Europe, the watch brand of Montandon Brothers was becoming a booming business in Paris, and that of Montandon Brothers Locle was in the process of gradual formation by the children of Charles Frederick Montandon Blaisleon. Prior to this time, a large family of Montandons from the area of Les Brenets and Locle had started their immigration to America around 1815 to 1816. The family itself belongs to the branch of Montandons called Détaché du Locle. This group was a watchmaking family, counting in its number a patriarch and 6 of his 8 children, plus a son-in-law. Every one of these individuals, we are told, were involved in watchmaking from start to finish. Prior to the family's departure, we have passport records for one of the children, Julian Montandon, who seems to have been involved in watchmaking around France from the circa 1807 to 1813 period, specifically the port cities of Bordeaux and Le Havre. He seems to have been reconnoitering points of departure to the New World before the family's exodus. This brings us to Thomas Jefferson's role in the history, or story rather, of Montandon watchmaking. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, occupied an especially vital facet in the fate of this immigrant family of Swiss watchmakers, as is revealed in the trove of documents known as the Jefferson Papers, providing close support, friendship, and affiliation with the family members, as we find in these original period sources. A close friend of the president's, Robert Patterson, had been tasked with locating a watchmaker for the nearby town on whom Thomas Jefferson and the local folk could rely to repair and service pocket watches. Patterson seems to have relied on another Swiss immigrant, Ferdinand Hassler, to resolve this important issue. Hassler was a Swiss-American surveyor who is considered the forefather of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, as well as the National Institute of Standards and Technology. He was the first superintendent of the U.S. Survey of the Coast, which became a part of the Department of the Army later, and was also the first superintendent of weights and measures. He himself had immigrated in 1805 to the U.S. Hassler's letter to Patterson on December 2nd, 1816, gives us the details of his solution for Thomas Jefferson's dilemma. In Elizabethtown is a Swiss gentleman with whom I got acquainted in London on his passage here, where he was made prisoner of war with all his family being taken on the passage. His name is Montandon. He has several sons and daughters, and a son-in-law, Lechaud, with him, all working in the watchmaking line from its first till the boxes, which they are now, since their arrival in this country, engaged very assiduously to make and all forms and fashions, gold and silver, etc., to the great number of movements which he has brought with him. So this is a direct quote from Hassler's letter to Patterson. This watchmaker, about which was spoken just now, is Pierre-Henri Montandon. His children, Julien, Sophie, Louise, Julie, Isaac, Aimé, Henri, Louis, and Louise Marianne, were with him. His daughter, Sophie, had been married to Louis Lechaud, known to the family as Aimé. According to the Jefferson papers, Louis Lechaud and Sophie Montandon would fulfill the role of that sought-after watchmaker. How does this bring us to Iowa in our tale? Well, Lechaud and his wife Sophie went on to become quite close to the president, who routinely invited them to his plantation to dinner at Monticello, and instructed his doors were always open to the family. Jefferson, too, provided business to the watchmaking family and acquired pieces from them. After the death of Lechaud in 1838, he was even buried, Louis Lechaud, in the Jefferson family cemetery plot. After her husband's death, Sophie rejoined her family, who had settled in Iowa. They had settled in Lee County, Iowa. Sister Louise Julie was in Denmark, in Lee County, and Sophie appears to have joined her. Brother Henri Louis, or Henry Louis, still practiced as a silversmith and appears in several places along the Mississippi River Valley, from as far north as Locle, but also to Quincy, Illinois, where we find him mentioned as a member of a Masonic lodge. There he operated in business under the name of Kimball and Montandon, circa 1830s to 1840s. He also frequently moved about the area, including back to Fort Madison, Iowa, also in Lee County, near his sisters. The father, Pierre-Henri, stayed behind in New Jersey, apparently still engaged in his trade. Julian Montandon appears to have been in New York City from approximately 1825 to 1830, and multiple watches with his patent numbers appear signed Julian Montandon, New York. He married Elizabeth Ent around 1825, and by 1830 moved to Washington, D.C., where with his brother Isaac Aimé ran a watch shop on Pennsylvania Avenue until their deaths, both in 1851. Julian would serve 3 U.S. presidents in his watchmaking, including John Quincy Adams, the 6th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, and Martin Van Buren, the 8th President of the United States. Julian would prove to be one of the most exciting Montandon watchmakers. He was an avid inventor, according to the papers of President Adams, to whom he showed objects of his own fabrication, including metallic thermometers in the form of a watch with 3 needles indicating lowest and highest temperatures during a 24-hour period, as well as the present temperature. He constructed a velocitometer, or tachymetre, which also impressed Adams, and he even explained the workings of sundials and other technical issues to the president. Julian provided the Department of War and the U.S. Senate with chronometers and serviced clocks, watches, and various other instruments. He appears to have continued the family's association with Ferdinand Hassler and became involved in various projects, including scientific experiments on the depths of the sea, astronomical research with the Naval Observatory in Washington, where he assisted with their research, even controlling the level of mercury in instruments to record more accurately the data and measurements therein. He sold metallic thermometers to the Navy, which were still in use prior to the Civil War. Julian appears to be mentioned on multiple occasions as Dr. Julian Montandon, and it is not clear from whence he obtained the title. Was this due to his knowledge, experiments, and experience in the science of his arts, or by way of a degree from one of America's educational institutions? We do not know. It is interesting to note, prior to Pierre-Henri and family's departure from Neuchâtel, the famous and precocious Finet Perret an inventor of diverse horological devices for watchmaking, worked and indeed lived with the Montandon family. And one may easily conclude that their frequent and insightful conversations would have taken place among young men concerning the arts and science of their profession, yielding such a high level of mastery and field proficiency in the questions of their subject. Returning to Iowa, in 1853, Sophie Montandon died 15 years after her husband in Denmark, Iowa. Despite the years and the distance, Sophie's body was transferred to the Jefferson family plot, where she was reunited with her spouse at Monticello. Sophie Montandon and Louis Lachaud are the only non-family members buried on the Jefferson family plot. Thomas Jefferson had passed away on the 4th of July in 1826, yet the bonds between his family and these watchmaker immigrants from the Swiss mountains of Neuchâtel remain solidly enmeshed across the generations. This is an indication certainly of the depths of that friendship, near kinship, wrought in the new burgeoning nation of America. Henry Louis remained in Fort Madison until his death in 1880. What a splendid transition we have witnessed in this early and important chapter of Montandon watchmakers. To have fled the ruined continent of Europe after Napoleon's defeat, captured as spies, and made prisoners of war in London, England, on their transatlantic voyage, rescued from oblivion by an intellectually and technologically keen ex-president, to settle in such rustic yet magnificent locale as Iowa, doubtless overlooked by splendid flocks of pelicans feasting on fish in the Mississippi River, to the din of the clam harvesting folk, raking the depths of the river for pearly clamshells with their long forks, spied from above by hungry turkey buzzards in search of their next riverine treat. It is curious whether Henry Lewis's watch case making arts continued to be employed while serving the Mississippi River Valley's community as a silversmith with many productive years under his belt, as can be attested to in Hassler's letter to Patterson explaining all family members being engaged in the watchmaking line from the first to its case. One can only be awed by this truly unique saga of a watchmaking family and its inspiring adventure to the New World. Their own place in the Montandon watch story is not only captivating, but indicative of the times in which they lived and the challenges over which they prevailed.